Okay, thank you, Jeff, for that prayer, and welcome everyone as we are now entering into our hour of study. We are going to be studying Exodus chapter 17. And so I'm really fascinated with the children of Israel's journeying throughout their journey from Egypt to the promised land, Canaan. But let's take a look at Exodus chapter 17. This is a pretty short chapter. This chapter is split into two stories that seem to be separate, but nevertheless, they're kind of paired together in this chapter. And so I want to just take a look at not just one of the stories, but both of the stories. And what I want you to do, I know we truly emphasize how to study the Bible using observation skills, interpretation, and application. That's especially challenging to do when we're doing like deep theological books like Paul's writings. There's a lot of theology there, and so you really are kind of pushing your mind to observe and follow the line of thinking that Paul's presenting, and trying to understand things from an abstract sort of way. But the Old Testament stories are actually very good for us to exercise these three steps: observation, interpretation, and application. Because, for one, stories are very engaging. And number two, there's a lot of pictures that come to mind when we look at these stories. And so, the temptation when we study any chapter in the Bible or anything in the Bible is that we can easily just kind of, it'll gloss over us, and we just kind of get to what seems to be interesting that pops out. Nothing wrong with that. But what I want to do is I want to just really encourage you to observe from this chapter what you notice, and we're going to try to interpret and apply. But I think observation is the key. So we're going to take time to read. Let's just read the first story. The first story is from verses 1 through 9, and the second story is from 10 to the end of the chapter. So let's just, some of you guys may be familiar with the stories, others may not be. Maybe it's been a while that you've revisited the story, but let's see what we can observe, okay? So I'd like to have a volunteer. Maybe we could have a volunteer read 1 through 9. I know it seems like it's a lot, but it should be fine. Who would like to read verses 1 through 9 just to start us off?
I'll read, Pastor.
Okay, Avis, thank you.
You're welcome. Exodus 17, 1 through 9. And it said, and all the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin after their journeys, according to the commandment of the Lord, and pitched in Rephidim. And there was no water for the people to drink. Wherefore the people did chide with Moses and said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, why chide with me, ye with me? Wherefore do ye tempt the Lord? And the people thirst there for water. And the people murmured against Moses and said, wherefore is this that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, what shall I do unto this people? They be almost ready to stone me. And the Lord said unto Moses, go on before the people, and take with thee of the elders of Israel, and thy rod wherewith thou smitest the river, take in thine hand and go. Behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. And he called the name of the place Masha and Meribah, because of the chiding of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, Is the Lord among us or not? Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, Choose us out men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand.
Okay. We read a little over, but that's okay. Thank you, Avery.
I read to verse 9.
Oh, you read to verse 9. Okay, so
Yes.
okay, I actually misquoted. I guess it was verse 7. Sorry. Okay. That's good. That's
Right.
fine. Thank you for reading that. So let's observe this first story. What observations can you make about this story? First of all, where does the story take place?
Take place in the wilderness.
In the wilderness. Okay. Why are they in the wilderness?
They had been traveling from Egypt. They were supposed to go to Canaan, and now they are on a roundabout traveling in the wilderness.
Okay. So why are they traveling there? I'd like to get an answer from the text. Okay, let's just say that we don't have any background information about them wandering around the wilderness for, like there's nowhere in this passage that says that. So let's just stick with what we do know. Just gathering the evidence from the text itself. Why are they there in the wilderness?
According to the commandment of the Lord, they traveled from the wilderness of Sin to Rephidim.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, why are they there? They're there because, and get this, notice this, are you observing this? They are there, why? Because the Lord commanded them to be there. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So why are they there? Where are they? They're in the wilderness. Wilderness of sin. Okay, why are they there? Because the Lord commanded them. Do you see that?
Yes.
Simple as that. You stick with the Bible. Let the Bible give the answer. Don't go into any other things, because when you go into any other things that doesn't say anything that's not said here in the text, you deviate, you see? You deviate, you go off tangent onto other topics. You want to stay grounded and anchored in what the narrative is saying, because that's what the author wants you to focus on. Okay? So we know the congregation of children of Israel, they're journeying to the wilderness of sin. Why? Because the Lord commanded them according to the commandment of the Lord, and they happened to pitch where?
Rephidim.
Rephidim. Okay. And what problem arose?
There was no water.
water.
There's no water. Okay, now this is very interesting. Whenever what makes for a good story, what makes for a good story is when there is a problem, or when there is a conflict of some sort. Isn't that right?
Yes.
When there's a conflict or there's a problem, that makes for a really good story. Right? And so right from the beginning of this chapter, we see the children of Israel journeying to the wilderness of sin. Okay, they're wandering through the wilderness. You could picture that. Why are they there? The Bible tells us God, according to the commandment of the Lord, and they end up along their journey. They end up somewhere, somehow, sometime. They pitch their tents in Rephidim. And as they pitch their tents in Rephidim, it says that there's no water. So right from the beginning, it tells you who's traveling, where are they traveling, why are they traveling, and what is the problem? All in one verse. Rolled up in one. Isn't that interesting? Who would have thought that there was so much power packed in that text, just that one verse, that just kind of sets the tone for the story? So already you're transfixed to the story. You're saying, okay, I know who's involved. I know what's their motivation for doing what they're doing. And also I know that there's a problem that they're faced with. Okay, you need to think in this way when you observe. Are you following? Okay. Because when you observe these things very carefully, you can interpret, and you can also see how it applies to you. That's why this is so important. You got to see how this applies to you. Okay. So what else would you do to further observe verse 1? Okay. We ask questions. Who, what, when, where, why, how, what, right? And what else would you do to observe this text? Anyone else? What would you do? Did we exhaust everything we can juice from this verse?
I think so.
You think so?
I don't think we mentioned it. It tells it like all the congregation.
Okay, all the congregation. Okay, what do you get from that, Jeff?
Well, that just means everybody, obviously. All of the
Okay.
children of Israel. Like
This
this.
includes everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. All the congregation. Very good. So the emphasis is all. Okay, everyone's there. Okay. What else? That's it? Okay, let me ask you this then. If that's it, what does sin mean? Because they're wandering in the wilderness of sin. What does sin mean? Is this the name of a place? Or is there a meaning?
Wilderness of sin.
What does sin mean?
Oh,
What does that word sin mean? Do you know, if we truly exhausted everything we can from this verse, do we know what sin means?
Transgression.
Not that sin. See, this is where you get confused. You see, what you need to do is really look at the meaning of the words. If you look at that word sin in our English language, yes, sin means transgression. But in the original Hebrew, that word sin is not the word sin that we know as transgression. Although it seems like it in the English language. Okay, the word sin in the original language, it means, are you listening? Do I have your attention? It means thorn. Thorn or clay. Thorn or clay. Okay? So that's what it means. The wilderness of thorn or the wilderness of clay. Okay? That's what it means. Now, what about Rephidim? What does that mean? Rephidim is a name of a place. But you know, names have meaning, especially in Bible times. Okay, the names have meaning. And the meaning of the name also may be related to what transpired in that place. Okay, or that place is known for what happened there. Like, for example, like when Jacob, he saw the ladder in his dream, and then he called that place Bethel. What does Bethel mean? Anyone remember from our previous study? Bethel means what? Bethel means house of God. House of God. Because remember, Jacob said, the Lord was here in this place and I did not even know it. And so he called it Bethel, house of God.
Yeah.
So,
And El is God.
yes, El is God. So Beth is house. Yep, exactly. Okay, basic Hebrew. Very good, Nora. Okay, so now did we exhaust everything in verse 1 of Exodus chapter 17, verse 1? For those who are just joining us, we're looking at Exodus chapter 17, verse 1. Have we exhausted everything in regards to observing? Okay.
Question, is the wilderness of sin and the wilderness of wandering the same place?
Well, I don't think so. There were different wildernesses they were in during their journey. I doubt that they were staying in just one place because they were constantly moving. So they must have gone to other parts of the region where there was wilderness as well. Okay, but let's go ahead and take a look at verse 2 now. Oh, by the way, let's not go too quickly. So why are they there? Why are they in the wilderness of sin? Why?
Was
God
God
told
commanded
them,
them.
Because God commanded them,
commanded them.
right?
Mhm.
God commanded them to be there. So were they supposed to be there?
Yes,
Yes. Why?
God must have had a purpose for them to be
God
there.
had a purpose or a plan, or he's leading them, and the leading led to that particular place at this particular time. Okay, so let me ask you this question. What lesson can you learn from that? Is there a lesson that comes out from that? Do you ever feel that when you are following God's leading or God's commands for your life, although you knowingly are following his leading, you're knowingly following his commands, but then a problem arises as a result of obeying him? Does that happen? When you follow God's clear commandment and a problem arises.
He probably wants to teach you something
No
From
doubt.
from that problem.
No doubt, right?
Right.
So, for example, the Bible tells us, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. That's a clear commandment, right? So you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath according to that commandment, right? So you say, okay, I have discovered this command from God. I'm now going to follow it. But then as you're about to follow it, your boss tells you, hey, I want you to work on Saturday. And if you don't work on Saturday, you're at the risk of losing your job to somebody else. That's an example, okay? Right? So is that a problem?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah. And are you following God's command?
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, you're trying to, right?
Right.
Yeah. You're attempting to, but you see that there's a problem, right? So how do you respond when there's a problem or a dire need suddenly arises due to you following God? How do you respond to that? And I don't want you to answer. That's a question for us to think about for ourselves. When God gives us a clear command and we're set out to follow it, do problems arise? Do challenges suddenly appear? And the answer is yes. Okay. And this is clearly an example of that. So don't expect that when God tells you to follow him, or you're following God's lead, don't expect it to be a bed of roses. Don't expect it to be smooth sailing. You are going to expect to face problems. And that is how it goes, unfortunately. Right? Any thoughts on that? Okay.
When you face a problem, you stick with the principle that you know, which is the law, the Decalogue. That's the principle that you always apply first.
The clear command of God, right? And that is what we desire to do. But is it easy to do that, Elnora?
It's the only way, though.
I'm sorry?
It's the only way.
I think that we sometimes check to see what we did wrong before we think that God is leading us wrong.
Yeah, so you could kind of be second
You know,
guessing.
I thought I followed, but I don't know that I did. Maybe this was the wrong job to take, you know?
Right. So it's natural to think that way. You're right. It's natural to think that way. But nevertheless, when God clearly leads us, there are times when there's going to be opposition. There's going to be times that there's going to be problems. But when those things do happen, we should not be, and this is easier said than done. Okay. It's easier said than done. We should not be, panicking. But of course, that's the reaction, right? Let's be honest, that we panic when there's problems. Okay. And surely enough, this problem starts to escalate to the point where Moses himself is feeling pressure. How did the people respond to this problem? God led them there. They pitched their tent in Rephidim, and in this problem, no water. How did the people respond? Verse 2. What do you observe?
They complain.
They were complaining. It says the people chided with who?
With Moses.
With Moses. So notice, it's interesting. Who led them there?
Moses.
God.
God led them there, based on
Yeah.
the previous text, right?
Yeah.
God led them there, but who did they chide? Who did they contend? Who did they strive against?
Moses.
Moses.
Because they could see him.
Okay. Yeah, probably. That's probably why. Find a scapegoat. Moses, this perfect scapegoat. I can see him, right? And what do they say to Moses? Give us water that we can drink, right? And what does Moses say?
Why do you contend with me?
Yeah, why do you contend with me? Why do you chide with me? Wherefore do you tempt the Lord? Now, how is it tempting the Lord? How is it tempting the Lord when they're stating a legitimate need? Is water a legitimate need?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's vital, right? It's a vital need. It's a basic, it's a basic thing of life that we all need, right? And it's a legitimate need, but why is it tempting the Lord when they were stating a legitimate need? Didn't the people have a right to be concerned? After all, they were in the wilderness of all places, where water's scarce.
They should have known that God would have helped them out after all that they've seen being led out of Egypt.
Yes. And this, the funny thing is, you see how God led them out of Egypt. Miraculous deliverance, right? If you saw that would just make your jaw drop and you'd be like, wow, I can't believe I witnessed this. And do you know what happened? And that's great that you brought that up, Sharon, because do you know what happened right before this chapter? Chapter 16.
The manna.
The manna, that's right. The manna fell down. So that's another evidence that God was providing for their basic needs in the wilderness. And despite that, when they ran out of water, what did they do?
Complain.
Complained.
They contend with Moses. They tempt the Lord, right? So when they're saying, "Give us water that we may drink," it was not faith that spoke those words, but it was wrath. They had no belief that Moses could give them water, and later on, they were almost ready to stone him. This is how bad it was, right? This is how bad that they were reacting. They're just reacting in wrath.
They should have said to Moses, "Go and speak to God."
Exactly. Or say,
Might
or,
give a
or
send
pray
us
to the
water.
Lord. Lord, just as you sent us manna before, please send us water now. Right?
Right.
Yeah. So verse 3, the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses. So notice, what did they do to Moses so far? Number 1, verse 2, they contend with him. Number 2, they murmured against him. So who's getting all the flack here?
Moses.
Moses. Like, notice they're not chiding against God. They're not murmuring against God directly, but they're doing that against Moses. And so they blame Moses. And by blaming Moses, Moses is saying, you are tempting the Lord. So what lesson can you learn from that? If you're in Moses' shoes, what lesson can you learn about leadership in that?
People are always going to blame you.
Yeah. I'm a pastor, so I know. Okay. Whenever something goes wrong, they blame the pastor, right? Isn't that the case at churches? Who do they label? The pastor, right? He's an easy
shepherd.
target.
You should know.
Yeah. The pastor's an easy target, right? Like everyone can just direct all their grievances, their complaints at the pastor. Oh, it's because of the pastor. The pastor tried to lead us into this stuff, and look at how things are going wrong. We wasted money. Our budget is now suffering because of this failed event or this failed project or whatever, and the pastor doesn't even know what he's doing, and so on and so on, right?
Right.
Is it easy to be and this is probably why a lot of people don't want to take on positions of leadership during nominating committee. Isn't that right?
Sure.
They're like, I don't want to take a position in leadership. I'm going to be blamed for if things go wrong, right? And poor Moses, man, he is getting it from all directions, like an overwhelming flood. All these complaints being heaped upon him to the point that they are ready to. Verse 4 says, he cries out to the Lord. Lord, help me. What should I do? These people, they're almost going to stone me. They're ready to stone him. The leader. The one that actually God appointed. The one that actually, by stretching out his rod, stretched out the waters of the Red Sea so that they could pass through. The one that instructed them about how they can survive in the wilderness by getting manna and so on and so forth, right? The people go against Moses. They're ready to stone him. And you know what? Was Moses doing what God told him to do?
Yes.
Yes. And get this. Moses was doing what God told him to do, and guess what Moses is? Is he faced with a problem here?
It's almost kind of like Moses for a second lost faith in God too, because he's kind of turned it around to himself. What shall I do with this people? They're ganging up on me.
And that's very interesting that you brought that up, because what ends up happening? where do they get water from? Just quick fast forward. Where do they get the water from eventually?
From the rock.
From the rock. Okay, now remember fast forward to the very end of the journey. What led Moses to be barred from the promised land?
He struck the rock and he was supposed to stick to it.
Yeah, he struck the rock again, but in what manner did he strike it?
In anger.
In anger. Why was he angry?
Because of the complainers.
Because the complainers are the people. The people were making the same complaints. It was repeated again. You know? So like after all those years, those people still did not learn their lesson. And this is another lesson for the people. If we are complainers, right? And because of their complaints, because they tempted Moses to the point that he takes credit for himself and he says, "Must we take this water out for you rebels?" And he hits the rock. And he takes the credit for himself this time. And as a result, he is barred from the promised land. Well, that's Moses' fault. Moses didn't have self-control. So he deserves that. But wait a minute. Can we also, as people, be responsible or be contributors to our leaders' fall? I'll repeat that again. Can we, as the people, put ourselves in the people's shoes that are complaining? Can we be responsible or can we be contributing to our leaders' fall at times?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, right? So it's not just like Moses is on him. He lost it. Too bad for him. But wait a minute, you were complaining. You're complaining and you're actually, grumbling and doing all those things, and you contributed to that outcome. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's easy to complain rather than wait to see what the outcome would be.
Exactly.
And I think that if I was Moses, I would have said, "See, Lord, when you saw me back by the bush, and I said, I don't want to lead these people." And he said he wasn't a speaker. So
Yeah.
all stuff started happening. Moses wasn't like Joshua stepping up and doing everything. Moses was saying, "I don't want to go. What am I going to tell him?" And then all these people jump on him. I would have been jumping back because I already told you this wasn't going to work out very good.
All right. Exactly.
You always want to have an excuse, and then most of us don't want our needs met. We want our wants met.
Yeah. Exactly.
This thing, they need water. Maybe that's why they were contentious. They're dehydrated.
Okay.
And you can't push a leader around who won't be pushed around. That's a difference too, because those people talk back to you when you talk to them, you kind of quiet down. But Moses was just like, "Wow, are you getting me?"
Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. What does God instruct Moses to do? Verse 5. Notice a clear instruction he gives Moses. What does he tell him to do? How many action words does he give him?
Go
on before the people.
for
Okay.
the people.
And take in your hand your rod.
Okay, you skipped one.
Take some of the elders.
Take some of the elders with you. Okay, and then take your rod. Okay. Take in thine hand and go. Okay, so that's like five things he said. 5 action words. Right. So far in verse 5, there's 5. And go. All right, go where? Where is he telling him to go? Verse 6. We read the whole this whole first story, so you guys should be able to scan and answer my question.
Horeb.
Okay? To go in Horeb, but
To the rock in Horeb.
The rock in Horeb specifically, right? And what does he tell him to do? Strike the rock.
And you
Smite.
shall strike the rock.
Okay, now wait a minute. We skipped something here. We skipped something. Strike the rock, yes. But what does he tell him? Where will God be?
Oh, he'll be before him.
He'll stand
Before him.
for him, but
Upon the
also
rock.
There,
upon the rock. So notice, behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock.
On the rock.
Okay, so in other words, where is God?
Visible in the front.
Okay, no, specifically where, based on this text? How do you read it?
He's
If you had
standing.
to go by what the text is saying, where is he?
He's
Where will
before,
God be?
and he's standing
He's standing upon the rock.
He's standing
on the
there
on the rock.
before Moses upon the rock. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
on the rock.
No argument there, right?
No.
That's what the text says. That's what the Bible says. That's what God says, right?
Right.
Okay, so it's interesting. I didn't notice this before because oftentimes we just kind of gloss over this. Okay, Moses strikes the rock. We just get to that part. Get to the good part. He strikes the rock. Water comes out. Boom. Wow, nice. Problem solved. But you're missing these little details. He says, I will stand before you upon the rock. So who's on the rock when Moses is striking the rock?
God
God.
is
God. Interesting. Interesting. And he says, there shall water come out of it that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. So he did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Now notice that. What did he tell Moses to do? Go before the people. Number 2, take who with you?
Elders.
Elders. Now he says, Moses did so in the sight of the
Elders.
elders. Now, why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
So there would be witnesses.
Okay, clearly that there will be witnesses, but then didn't everybody else also witness that too? Most likely.
They might have been the people who could have spoke up if they heard, huh? They were in charge of all those groups of people, maybe.
Okay. The charges of groups of people that doesn't happen until the next chapter, chapter 18.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Do you
that's a
water-
good thing.
Do you think the water was flowing before the people got there? And the people didn't see Moses strike the rock?
Okay. Could be, but that could be. But I think the focus is why the elders. Okay, so it could be. Let's just assume we don't know. Okay, maybe the people were there to see Moses do this or not. Okay, it doesn't say really, but it does say that clearly who was there to witness this without a doubt.
the
The
elders.
The elders. So why did God tell him, okay, we're okay with go on before the people. We're okay with take thy rod with you, take it in thy hand and go. I'll stand upon the rock before you and you smite the rock. And take the elders with you. Why take the elders with you? And it says, and Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Again, the elders are mentioned again. Why?
Maybe they heard what God said.
Okay. Okay. Well, is that do we know for a fact that's the case?
No.
No, we don't. That's speculating, right? We don't know for sure.
Elders.
Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. We don't know. The author doesn't focus on that, and the author doesn't give us enough information to gather what really happened. Okay, we just go by what information's given. But in this whole chapter, I see examples of leadership. I see leadership, the role of a leader, which is not an easy one. And I believe the fact that God told Moses to take the elders of Israel was to show the elders by example a model of leadership.
Where did you get that?
Because we see that also in the story of Jesus. What does Jesus do? When he's going to certain places, like for example, when he goes to Jairus' house, right? He tells everyone to stay behind except for Peter, James, John. In fact, he lets Peter and James, John come into certain situations that the other disciples cannot. Okay? And why is that? Because Jesus picking favorites, or is he training certain people for leadership? And so, and the reason and why, how do I come to that is because it clearly says elders. Okay, which is different from any other group. Elders, what does that word elders imply?
Leaders.
Yeah, leaders. Someone that is more experienced or has more wisdom due to their experience. Someone that is fitted to be an overseer. That's what elder is, overseer. Right? And if you look at also in the book of Timothy, the whole qualifications of an elder, it tells you. Okay? So no doubt, there is definitely leadership training happening here. And also, if you also notice, the tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel were all in different tribes, and among their tribes, there were people in charge of each of the tribes. Okay, it was a very organized. It was not like a mob or a swarm of people just going haphazardly any which way. It was a very organized group of people. God organized them. It was so organized that if you look at the story of Balaam, right, when Balaam was standing before the cliff overseeing the camp of Israel, right, it was so well organized, right? It was so well, like it was like to the T. They were like so organized and so arranged in such perfection that it was just such a sight to behold. Okay. So, and the reason why I see that is because the text tells us, the text implies when God says, number one, take the elders of Israel with you. And verse 6, it says, when Moses did this, it says that he did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Okay. So I see this as leadership training. In other words, how to deal with conflict. Were they faced with a conflict? Was Moses faced with a conflict? Oh, yeah. He was like saying, they're about to stone me, Lord. What am I supposed to do? Right? So God also wanted this to be a learning lesson for the elders. Because no doubt, will the elders as leaders themselves also encounter conflict?
Yes.
Yes, for sure. Right? And where was God in the midst of this conflict?
Standing on the
He was
rock.
standing on the rock before Moses. Right?
I have a question.
Yes.
Did that rock follow them everywhere they went in the wilderness?
I don't think so.
No.
That would be so funny if a rock was rolling next to them all the time, wherever they went. That'd be quite comical to think about. No, I don't think so. There are so many rocks in the wilderness. If you go to if any of you are from California, there's a place called Joshua Tree. Have you guys heard of Joshua Tree?
Yes.
So many rocks there, right? Take your pick. There's so many rocks there, big boulders, right? So I would think that the other rock that they came to was not the rock of Horeb. It was a different rock. And take your pick. There's so many rocks in the wilderness.
This rock, is that the same rock in Rephidim?
I don't know. Look it up. Why don't you do that, Elnor? Look it up. Note the place where that rock was, where they went, because I don't think so.
Standing on the rock, was that just his essence or his spirit, or did Moses see something?
That we don't know. All we do know, based on what the text says, is that God's presence was there upon the rock. So we can't speculate. It doesn't give us, it doesn't say his essence was on the rock, or that his, physical form was on the rock. It doesn't say that. It just says that God's presence was there. And I would kind of think like in the way the pillar of cloud was there, the pillar of fire was there, the Shekinah glory was there, the burning bush was there. All those represented God's presence. So I don't know if God was visible or invisible when he was standing there upon the rock. I'm kind of thinking he was invisible, but that's just speculation. We don't know.
If it's visible, they would die.
Well, he was visible as a pillar of cloud, was he not? He was visible as the pillar of fire by night and day, was he not? Yeah. But you're right. Like when you entered the most holy place, the Shekinah glory, you died. You went into his presence. You're right. But nevertheless, God did manifest himself in other ways, where the people could see evidences of his presence there. Okay, so verse 7. This amazing thing happens. He smites the rock, water comes out. And what does he do in verse 7?
He called them names of the place Massa and Meribah.
Okay, so he called a place, he names the place Massa and Meribah. Why did he name it as such?
Because of the contention of the children of Israel.
Okay. And what were they saying?
Because they tempted the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not?
Okay. So the name of the place is associated with how the people behaved in that location. Are there moments in our past that served as time markers of how we behaved?
Yes.
Yeah. There are times that I can remember things in my past of how I behaved, and I'm like, I can't believe I did that. Can you guys relate? Or is it just me?
No, we can relate. I can relate.
You can relate to that? Okay. So we can relate. We're in good company. That's not good company, but that's, you know what I mean. And they tempted the Lord. How did they tempt the Lord? What did they say that was tempting the Lord? They were saying, is the Lord among us or not?
Right.
Is the Lord among us or not? Have you guys ever thought about that? Has that thought ever crossed your mind when you're faced with problems and you say, is God here or not? Based on what I'm going through, it sounds like he's not. God, where are you? Right?
He said, I will never leave you or forsake you.
Yeah, but
it didn't say, but be quiet though. We expect to see some sign, and that's what happened to all the people in the New Testament. They said, if you show us a sign, we'll believe.
Right.
So people didn't believe, and we sometimes want a sign that we're going the right direction, or that God is leading us.
Right. Now, they tempted the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Where was the Lord?
He was there.
Huh?
He was there on the rock.
He was there on the rock, exactly. Clearly, God was there, and he already was on top. In this, forgive my my figure of speech. He was already on top of the problem,
Mhm.
right? He already had the problem covered, and he was there all along. And that's where we really need to understand. And this is easier said than done, because the problem is so clearly before us, and it's hard to see God in the moment, because the problem is the thing that just we hone in on. That's like tunnel vision. We just focus on the problem. We're like, this problem, and we magnify the problem. The problem seems overwhelming, and there seems to be an impossibility of how that problem can be solved.
We also think the problem wouldn't be there if God was there.
Right. And it seems like God's not there, right? We don't see his presence in a clear way. So you're tempted to doubt that he's not there, right? So a lot of lessons here. A lot of lessons on leadership, a lot of lessons about tempting the Lord and doubting whether or not he is there for us or not, right?
I think so many stories too show without faith it's impossible. The men who let the man down, they knew Jesus was down there, but if they didn't go down there, the woman had to touch his garment. So sometimes it's there, but we have to somehow have faith it's there.
Amen. We got to have faith, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's all about exercising faith. We have to learn from our time markers of how we behaved in the past. Oh man. And from that, although it's painful to remember those things are also to be remembered to help us to know how to remember how God led us in the past. And when the problem arises, we're better able to face it. Unfortunately, we're all like the children of Israel. Children of Israel, time and time again, failed in this regard. They failed to trust God. They failed to exercise faith in him. They kept grumbling and complaining every step of the way, every time they hit a problem. And that is just like us, just like me. And
but we'd like our problem be the same problem, then would be easy. But every time we get one problem, the next problem is a
different problem. Exactly.
That's what's hard.
And speaking of which, Retta, that leads us to our next problem in this chapter. Okay. You're right. Right. God was there. He was clearly there with them. He provided for their need. He was there present. And then there's another problem. Verse 8. Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. Okay. So is this the same place or different place?
Same place.
Same place. Rephidim. Right?
Different problem.
Yeah, same place, different problem. Okay. So Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. Moses said unto Joshua, verse 9, choose us men. Avis read this, right? Choose us out men to go and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand. And so verse 10, so Joshua did as Moses said unto him and fought with Amalek, and Moses and Aaron and went up to the top of the hill. You know the rest of the story. Who wants to read verse 11?
That's an amazing.
Yeah. Okay, somebody read verse 11 for us, please.
And so it was when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed, and when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed.
Okay, so we see that Joshua is fighting Amalek. And then Moses, he goes up where?
On top of the hill,
Top of the hill
with the
And-
rod of God in his hand.
with the rod of God in his hand. Now, who was with him?
Aaron and her.
Aaron and Who are they?
Aaron's just
Brother,
Aaron is Moses' brother. Yes. Who's
Is the
Okay. Little's mentioned about We don't know who was clearly, although there are some hints in the Bible. Some people, like according to Jewish tradition and commentators, they say was the husband of Miriam.
Oh,
That's what they say. And they say that he was the brother-in-law of Moses and Aaron. First Chronicles chapter 2, verse 3 through 20 says that he was a descendant of Judah through Phares and Hezron.
First Chronicles
2,
2.
3 through 20. Okay. In Exodus chapter 24, verse 14, Moses makes a joint regent with Aaron when he ascended up into Sinai. So anyway, was there with Moses. Now it's interesting. It says that as the battle was being fought, what was taking place? We see Moses. It
went
says
up
that
to
when
the
Moses
top of
did
the
what?
hill.
he sat
Went up
down.
to the top of the hill.
He had to sit down on a rock.
Well, no, that's later.
Oh,
Went
okay.
up to the top of the hill.
He went up on the top of the hill, and what else did he do?
He
Did he
held
just
up
go
his
top
hand.
of the hill?
They
He
held
held
the
up. He held up his hand. And what happened when he held up his hand?
Israel prevailed.
Israel prevailed, and we let down his hand.
they do
Amalek prevailed. So why would Moses let down his hand?
that.
He
probably
was
got tired.
Because they got heavy.
He was
Yeah, it
tired.
probably got tired, right? So wouldn't that be something? I don't know how many guys do we have here. How many guys do we have here in this group today?
Or
They hold up their hands.
There's a few. Okay. I don't know if you guys are into sports, girls, if you're into sports, but like I know that we just recently had a Super Bowl, but what if your favorite team, your Super Bowl team won as long as you held up your hands? Every time your hand went down, your favorite team would fumble the ball, or it'll be intercepted by the other team, or worse yet, score against your team. You're like, oh man, I should raise my hand, But get this is in a battle. So the stakes are higher, right? You see your own brothers, children, countrymen battling out against an enemy. And when your hands go down, they're losing. And when your hands are up, they're winning. Now let's pause right there. This is something I wondered about. Why would God do this? Why would God make the outcome of the battle dependent on the literal raising of Moses' hands? Why couldn't Moses just pray and God will answer? Oh God, please give us victory over the Amalekites. Amen. I mean, what is the merit of having his hands held up? I mean, why couldn't it be another way instead of just having his hands raised up? How about if their hands were down, they would win? That'd be easier for Moses, right? As long as I keep my hands down, my people will win. But no, if his hands go down, Amalek wins. If he raises his hands up, his people win. But which one's easier to do?
Put your hands down.
Put your hands down, right?
You
Why
put
make
it down, yeah.
so God, make it easier on Moses. Don't make, just as long as he keeps his hands down, then his people will win. If he raises his hands up to swat a fly, then oops, like Amalek's winning. Why do it this way, Lord? Why did God do this?
Because praise is always with your hands up. I think, maybe.
Okay, that is good theory.
I
Yeah,
know.
it represents a cross.
Represents cross. What do you mean
Yeah,
by that?
when you held the hands up. So
Yeah, I'm not off.
like we can see, when they went up, so we can see the symbol of cross. That's what I read it somewhere.
Okay, interesting theory. Now, can you give me biblical evidence about that, Guru? Because every time we give an explanation, we have to have a biblical evidence or example ready, or else it's speculation. Let me ask you this. Was there other times prior to this event where Moses was instructed to raise his hands and stretch out his hand?
At the Red Sea.
Exactly. His raising his hands was the same case for parting of the Red Sea.
But
Moses,
didn't Aaron help him hold his hands up?
for that? No.
No?
Mm-mm. For the parting of the Red Sea, Moses was instructed to lift up his rod and stretch out his hand. In Exodus chapter 14, verse 16, it says, I'll read it to you because I have the reference right here. But lift up thy rod and stretch out thine hand over the sea and divide it, and the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned. Now he closes it on this part. He stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it. And the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Okay.
Exodus 14.
That's Exodus 14. Okay. 21 and 27. So, and verse 16 as well. Exodus 14:16, verse 21, and verse 27. So that miraculous thing that happened in the Red Sea is because God told Moses, stretch out your hand. Right? So in the same way, Moses was doing the same thing in this instance as well. Okay? And also, furthermore, that was not the only time. If you look at the 10 plagues that fell upon Egypt, okay, the first plague, where water was turned to blood, remember that? And the plague of fire and hail, the plague of locusts, those, and there's another one that I didn't write down. Those were plagues that Moses stretched out his hand and rod, and those plagues came. So you got to study the Bible and see these patterns. Okay? So in other words, why is Moses, when he raises his hands, Joshua wins, and when he puts his hands down, Amalek wins? Why? It's because this has always been the means by which God worked, as Moses stretched out his hand and lifted up his rod. And if you look at the previous story, what did he tell Moses to do? take your rod
Mhm.
and go to the rock
Mhm.
and strike it, right? So
Mhm.
something about, so both stories in this chapter had to do with Moses and the rod, right? So, and also the reason why he tells Moses to use a simple, humble rod and to stretch out his hand is to show that God is dispensing his favor and honor, and the day of victory might be totally ascribed to the rod, the humble instrument, and the power of God, not to Israel. Just like we said in Gideon, right? God did not allow Gideon to have a large army. Why? Because they take the credit for themselves. He wanted them to be very small, so that it shows that there's no way they could have won except the power of God. And so in the same way here, God is telling Moses, use your rod. Humble instrument. There's nothing magical about that rod. It's not like a magic wand. No. It's a symbol of that God can work through humble instruments. We are out of time. I wish we could go further. Do you want to finish this chapter next week?
Amen.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a cliffhanger now. Moses is stretching his hands, they're winning, and then he puts his hands down. Oh, they're losing. And then we're going to see what happens next time and what lessons we can learn from that. Was there a lot of lessons here in this chapter?
Yes.
Yeah. Helpful things, what, like things on leadership, what we learned about leadership. We learned about the responsibility of a leader. We learned about how, whether we're a leader or not, we also can contribute to the well-being of our leaders. When problems arise as a result of doing God's will, how do we respond to that? Are we doubting that God is with us when those problems take place, right? When he was there all along. So that and other examples of what we learned today. A lot of stuff that we can learn from this chapter. I'm telling you, this chapter has so many lessons on leadership, on intercession, on dealing with our life's problems, trust and faith in the Lord, complaining, murmuring, what that leads to. What does it mean to tempt the Lord? That's all that is like packed into this chapter.